I feel like they haven't launched a pattern in such a long time, but I have been dreaming about this particular design for more than half a year, and I am so excited to finally launch the pattern so you can make it as well. So let me introduce the Fermina dress and the top. By the way, many of our patterns come in US sizes from 2 to 12. But we are really trying to make the size range wider, so this pattern actually comes from size 0 to 20, and in European system it would be from 32 to 52. So I hope you will enjoy this tutorial and make a few cute dresses and tops.
This pattern comes in two styles, as a dress, or if you simply skip the bottom two frills, it makes a great blouse. The upper part is shirred, and also there are very puffy sleeves which you can wear on your shoulders, or you can also slide them off for a different look. The hem for both dress and top is 8 cm shorter at front, and the dress option has two gathered frills. This is an advanced beginner level project. It is not the quickest garment to make because the sleeves take some time, as well as the gathering of the frills for the dress option. Otherwise, I would say it is rather simple. The shirring helps to achieve very nice fit without many try-ons. And overall, this dress doesn't require a crazy precision. I do feel bad saying this, but what I mean is that there is some room for errors, and that's why this design actually is beginner friendly. This pattern comes in A4 and US letter format, which you can print with the regular printer, as well as in A0 format, which you can print at a copy shop. There are only 7 pattern pieces, but some of them are pretty large. The upper details I'm showing are both for dress and top options, and these two are the frills only for the dress. I will be using a very light silk, but you can also use medium weight dress fabrics such as cotton or viscose or polyester. The main thing is that the fabric isn't way too stiff. Matching threads, of course. You will also need an elastic thread for shirring. I was very lucky to get it in red color, but don't be too worried if you cannot find a perfectly matching tone, because it will go on the fabric's wrong side anyways. For the sleeves, you will need a 1 cm wide elastic band. If you want statement bows for the sleeves, I recommend to use an interfacing. However, for a softer look, interfacing isn't needed. I will also use sewing machine and a serger. But if you don't have a serger, then no worries, you can use sewing machine zigzag stitch. And now we are ready to cut everything out. By the way, we will need to draw a lot of markings, and I recommend to use either a soap or a special fabric marker. Please do not use a chalk because it is difficult to get it out from the fabric. I will cut small notches in the sleeve cuff detail. Also, I will cut V-type notches at the middle of this detail. This will help me later to match it together with the sleeve. Since my fabric's right and wrong side is very similar, I am using a soap to mark the wrong side. I will also draw the middle points of the frills. While we are here, we can also cut off the interfacing details for the sleeve cuffs. But don't forget, this is only an optional step. Now let's leave a lot of markings on the front and back panels. At first, I am drawing the middle line for the hem, and this will help to match the upper frill with the top part. And then I mark where the shirring will go. This step should be done on the fabric's right side, and at first I draw only dots, and later I draw a line through these dots. I do not draw every single line, maybe 1 in 4 or 5, but if you are completely new to shirring, then feel free to draw every single line, and in this way you will be sure that you are very precise with it. Repeat these steps with the back panel as well. We are finally ready to start sewing. So let's start by hemming the neckline. I will show you 3 options how to do it, but I personally will use a baby hem. So the first thing to do, you need to fold 1 cm of the edge and stitch around 2 to 3 mm apart from this folded edge. Do this step for both front and back panels. I highly suggest to give a quick press. It is not mandatory, but I feel like it is easier to work with this hem later. Now let's take some sharp scissors and let's cut off the excessive part of the seam allowance. Be very careful not to cut in the stitch or in the main fabric, just this seam allowance as close to the stitch as possible. Do this step for both front and back panels. When it is finished, let's fold the edge again and stitch 2 to 3 mm apart from the folded edge. This is a very sophisticated way how to work with hems, and it does take a little bit of patience too. After you have finished hemming both front and back panel necklines, give a quick press, and this is a good moment because later it would be much more challenging. If you used a baby hem, you can skip to the next chapter of this video, but here I will show you 2 other hemming methods that are much quicker. Set the zigzag stitch on your sewing machine. Make it quite dense and do not make it too wide. I will use a fabric scrap with contrasting threads, so please don't be confused. So you need to fold the hem allowance and make the zigzag stitch along the edge, so one stitch goes off the fabric and other stitch goes into the fabric. After that, cut the excessive part of the hem allowance. I promise you it will look much better when using the same color of threads, and maybe you need to experiment with the density of this stitch. The third way would be to use a serger, and this is super fast way how to work with hems on light fabrics. You will need 3 threads and make notes on these tension regulators. The idea is that you will need quite high tension for the right needle and super high tension, like almost the maximum tension on the upper and the lower loopers. Also adjust the stitch length to a shorter one than you would normally use. I wouldn't say to the exact minimum, but I usually put it between 1 or 2. Some sergers do have this differential button, and if you put it below the normal, it will stretch the hem, and in this case it will give a nice decorative look, but if you don't have it, no worries. Then set the stitch width to the minimum. Normally I have it on number 2, which is something at the middle, but in this case we need this stitch to be as narrow as possible. Here we have this weird button and it is called a stitch widener. In this case I would recommend to try to turn it off, but in some cases it is actually looking better if you keep it on. So you will need to work on a few samples to decide whether you want to keep it on or off. I promise this is the last thing, so take off the left needle completely. Now simply serge and make sure that the serger's knife is cutting off the hem allowance, and that's it. Let me know in the comments which hem type did you choose. We are ready for the shirring part. We need to wind up the bobbin with the elastic thread. In general, it is suggested to use hands to wrap the elastic thread around the bobbin with a little bit of tension, but at the same time with not too much tension. But I believe that laziness is the greatest drive for progress. That's why I am using a sewing machine, but I use it on a very slow speed, and I keep the elastic thread through my fingers to give this slight tension. For this design you will probably need to repeat this step for 2 or 3 more times. Place the bobbin with the elastic thread in the sewing machine. Be very careful to place it correctly, because otherwise it might ruin the fabric, speaking from experience. And at the top, place the regular thread. So here we have the back panel and the lines we drew previously. And we need to simply stitch over these lines. Stitch on the right side of the fabric, so the normal thread is on the right side of the fabric and the elastic thread is on the wrong side of the fabric. Since I have a very light fabric, the shearing effect starts right away. But if you have a heavier fabric, it is completely normal that the shearing starts only around the 5th or 10th row, and it might not get so narrow as my panel, but when you will be using an iron, it will also get much more narrower, so do not worry too much. Do this step for both front and back panels. By the way, feel free to make fewer lines if you would like to have more of a baby doll silhouette for this top or dress. When I have finished shearing, let's press both front and back panels. I actually use a lot of steam because I feel it makes the shearing go even tighter. Give some special attention to the side edges, so later it will be easier to sew together front and back panels at this point right here. So place the back panel with the front panel right sides facing each other. Pin the side edges. Don't forget that there are tiny armholes, so do not sew them. Sew starting from the point I am showing to the bottom. Let's change back to the regular thread. We will not need this elastic thread anymore. And let's stitch the sides same 1 cm apart from the edge. Repeat that with both sides. After that, let's neaten the side seams. If you will be using a zigzag stitch, you should also cut off those loose threads. But since I have a serger with a knife, I usually do not bother to cut off the threads because the serger's knife will cut it off anyways. After that, press the seam allowances towards the back panel. And now let's prepare the sleeves. The first thing we need to do is to work with the slits. So take the bias tape and place it on the sleeves so the right sides are facing each other. Then stitch 5 mm apart from the edge. The bias tape is slightly longer than necessary, so if there's some left, then simply cut off the excessive part. All these steps I will be doing with both sleeves simultaneously. I will do a few snips in the same allowance to release the tension. And of course, be very careful not to cut in the stitch itself. To make life a bit easier, let's understitch the bias tape. So we need to make a stitch around 1 to 2 mm apart from the seam we previously made, and we need to stitch through the bias tape and also the seam allowance. Since there is so much tension, I will do a few more snips. After that, I fold the bias tape around the same allowance and then I fold it again. And I press it down so it will be easier to stitch. Take your time and try to do it as smoothly as possible. Make a stitch 1 mm apart from the folded edge. At this point it might look uneven and maybe even bubbly, but we will press it out. After some steaming and pressing, it becomes very nice and flat. After that, let's sew the side seams. So fold the sleeve in a way that the right sides are facing each other and pin the side seam of the sleeve. Stitch 1 cm apart from the edge. Neaten the side seams of the sleeves. Press the seams towards the back. While we are here on the ironing board, let's work with the upper part of the sleeves. I will fold and press 1/2 of the seam allowance, which is 1 cm and 25 mm or 1/2 inch. Work this way all around the upper edge for both sleeves. Then fold again the same amount and stitch 1 mm apart from the folded edge. In this way, we will make a tunnel through which the elastic band will go through. Take the safety pin and the necessary amount of the elastic band and place the safety pin at the end of this elastic band. And then push it through the tunnel we just made. To not lose the other end, I am securing it with a pin. When you have put it through, use a sewing machine stitch to secure the elastic band. Do it for the both ends. Now you can safely even out the gathering on the elastic band. Repeat the step with the other sleeve as well. And now we need to make a gathering at the bottom edge of the sleeve. Set your sewing machine stitch to number 4 or even higher. Make a stitch 5 mm apart from the edge and remember not to backstitch and leave long threads at the ends. Then make another stitch approximately 3 mm apart from the previous stitch. Repeat these steps with the other sleeve as well. Let's prepare the sleeve cuffs. So if you are going for those statement bows, press on the interfacing. If you want softer bows, then simply skip this step. Here I can show you the difference. So this is the cuff with the interfacing, and this is the cuff with no interfacing. Either way, take one edge and find the seam allowance between the first and the third notch. Fold 1 cm and press it. Do the step for the other cuff as well. This will help us a lot later. Take the other edge which isn't pressed and again find the first and the third notch. Our goal is to gather the sleeve bottom edge to the length of the distance between these notches. We will need to lay together the cuff's right side with the sleeve's right side. Take the gathering threads that are on the fabric's wrong side and pull them evenly. When you feel like there's too much gathering and tension on one side of the gathering threads, then simply move to the other ends of the gathering threads and start pulling from that side. Place the gather sleeve's bottom edge between the notches. Start by pinning against the first and the third notch. Then adjust the gathering so the length is perfectly matching with the distance between the notches. And then continue pinning and use as many pins as you need. Stitch 1 cm apart from the raw edge. Take your time and make sure that this gathered edge gets sewn on very nice and orderly and as even as possible. Give a very light press in a way that the seam goes towards the cuff. Let's work with the tie part of the cuff. So fold it in a way that the right sides are facing each other. Pin and stitch starting from the first notch and along the edge around the corner. Repeat the step with the other 3 tie parts as well. Stitch 1 cm apart from the edge and try to get as close to the notch as possible. Trim off the corners of the seam allowances, but be very careful not to cut in the stitch. This step will help us to avoid bulking when we will flip the ties from the inside out. Use some sort of a stick that doesn't have a sharp edge to flip the ties from the inside out. I was actually struggling a lot there because my fabric isn't as slippery as it looks, but in most of the cases it should be much more easier. Repeat the step for all 4 ties. As you can see, the ties are looking like some sort of weird pipes and it's not a professional look. That's why we really need to press them down. And what I usually do is I use a thicker needle and I try to bring the stitch as close to the edge as possible. Be very careful not to take out some threads from the fabric, but take your time and this will really elevate the look. When you have managed to place the seam where it should be, press it down with an iron. As you can see, it instantly looks way much more polished. Before we are moving forward, I can tell that, at least in my case, there are some gathering stitches visible from the outside. That's why I will take them out. I usually use pliers and scissors, and that's the quickest way how I have found to get rid of the gathering stitches. But maybe in your case the gathering stitches are left in the same allowance and they aren't visible from the outside, so then you can simply leave them as they are and just move to the next step. To join the inside part of the cuff, I will be using a stitch in a ditch method. I will hand stitch the inside part of the cuff with the thread in a different color. Take the folded part of the cuff and place it in a way that it covers the stitch you made previously. I will quickly pin it to secure it in the place before I hand stitch. I'm a bit shy about my hand stitch because I do it quite roughly, but the main thing is that it keeps everything in place. If you do not want to use the stitch in a ditch method, you can also use an invisible hand stitch. I would say that the invisible hand stitch would be even more sophisticated way how to join the inside part of the cuff, but it will take way much more time. However, it could be a bit easier for beginners, so I don't know, it's up to you. So for the stitch in a ditch method, we need to work from the right side of the sleeve. Our goal is to make a stitch as close as possible to the cuff, but do not sew on the cuff. We need to sew on the sleeve part. And we also need to catch the inside part of the cuff here. Take your time, go as slow as you need. Here you can see how it should look like from the inside. Just in case, I will remind to do this step with the other sleeve as well. Press the bottom part of the folded edge of the cuff. Take out the threads from hand stitching. You can also leave this step as the very final one, it doesn't matter that much. Now we have finished the sleeves completely and we are ready to join them to the top part. So find armholes for both top and the sleeve and place them together with the right sides facing each other. Stitch 1 cm apart. Repeat the step with the other sleeve as well. After that, neaten both armholes. I would highly recommend to fix these seams in the place, otherwise we are risking that they might come out. So I will use the sewing machine's backstitch and make a few stitches back and forth to fix the seam towards the top part. Do the step for all 4 seams. Here I am doing a quick try-on. If you are making a top option, then this is the point when you simply need to do the hem and you are finished. I would recommend to use the same hem type as you did for the neckline. However, if you are also making a dress, we need to neaten this part. Either you are using a serger or a zigzag stitch, simply go around this bottom part. Because I have a very light fabric, my serger is slightly gathering it, but it's solvable by pressing it out. Let's start working with the frills. So take both upper frills and lay them with the right sides facing, pin the side seams and stitch 1 cm apart from the edge. And while we are here, let's do the same step with the lower frill as well. It has the same shape, it's just quite a bit larger. After that, neaten all 4 side seams. Press the seams towards one side. Now only for the upper frill we need to neaten the bottom edge. And here again I am giving a quick press to smoothen everything out. Now we need to hem the upper part of the upper frill, as well as the upper and lower edge of the lower frill. Use the same type of hem you used for the neckline. Since I used the baby hem previously, I will be using it again. But as you can see, these frills, they are huge and it will take quite some time. But in my case, I feel this fabric is so precious and the baby hem gives the most luxurious feel. But otherwise, if I would be making this dress from linen or cotton, I would totally use the zigzag stitch or the serger stitch for the hem. No matter which hem you chose, give a quick press. After that, we need to gather the upper and lower frill. We need to make gathering stitches 1.5 cm apart from the upper edge. You can draw some markings with a soap or a marker, but personally I will be using the guidelines on the bottom of the sewing machine. So set the sewing machine stitch to number 4 or even higher and make 2 stitches that are going in parallel. Remember to do this step for both upper and the lower frill. I will start with joining the lower frill with the upper frill. So gather the lower frill until the length is the same as the upper frill's bottom edge. Pin the lower frill to the upper frill in a way that the lower frill's wrong side is matching the upper frill's right side. You will need to sew the gathered part to the upper frill just right above the neatening stitch. Remember to match the side seams and the middle points. So let's sew together both frills. In ideal scenario, you could make a stitch right between the gathering stitches, but if it's not possible, then just make a stitch right next to them. But please do not sew right on top of the gathering stitches because we will need to take them out, and if you sew on top of them, it will be very difficult to take them out. Also, while you are sewing, use your fingers or maybe a needle to even out the gathering. I will use the pliers to take out the gathering stitches. I highly recommend to do this because when there is only one stitch left, it is not very noticeable and it looks quite fancy. We are so close to the finish line and we are ready to join the frills to the top part. So again, let's make the gathering the same length as the bottom part of the top. Start by pinning the side seams and the middle points. And the same way we join the lower frill with the upper frill, here as well join the gathering part with that zone right above the neatening seam. For me, it took so much time to gather and join the frills, even though I do not think it is that complicated, but I guess those frills are just quite large. Let me know in the comments whether it was the same for you or you got through it quite quickly, or maybe you even have some tricks you could share with us. So here as well I will take out the visible gathering stitches, and you know what, this is it, we have finished this dress. If this tutorial was helpful for you, please leave us a like and subscribe to our channel for more sewing and knitting tutorials. Bye!